My name is Abby Lovett. I'm a staff member with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is Tuesday, May 26th, and I'm here with Hardy Hall, who is a Vietnam War veteran. Mr. Hall, could you go ahead and spell your name for everyone?
Right. My first name is Hardy, Hardy, middle initial L, last name Hall, Hall.
Great, thank you. And let's start at the beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born in South Carolina in 1947. I think I lived there about a year or so. My family moved to Miami, and that's where I grew up, went to high school, etc.
And could you tell me a little bit about your parents? What were they? What were their jobs? And if there was a military history in the family?
Sure. My mother was a supervisor, head supervisor, or head nurse, if you will, of surgery at Jackson Memorial Hospital, which is like one of the largest hospitals in the Southeast. And my dad was the chief X-ray technologist. That's where they actually met each other. And then later he was the head of the X-ray training school at the same hospital. Nobody in my immediate family were members in the military. I had a cousin who was a pilot during the Korean War, and I had a brother-in-law who was in the Navy, roughly the same time I was in Vietnam. But basically, my parents, were loving, caring. They were nurturing. They basically let me do what I needed to do or wanted to do. They thought I was self-sufficient, and smart enough that I didn't need any tutoring or extra stuff. They were a good family. They're all deceased now. Both their parents are deceased.
I see. And did you have siblings when you were growing up?
I have one sister a year and a half younger.
So let's talk about your education. With maybe your early school years, anything that stands out from, elementary, middle, even high school?
No, like I said before, I went to school all through the time I lived in Miami. So I went to elementary school there. At the time, we called it a junior high and a senior high. I liked pretty much school. I actually took extra classes. I took this early bird English thing, which is like I still remember words I learned from there. And then I made pretty good grades. I didn't think I applied myself too much. So in junior high, I was in the honor roll virtually every term, or the principal's list. And then in high school, I was a member of the National and Beta Honor Society, and the Latin Club, and some club called Interact, like a social service club. And I graduated like in the top 8% of my high school. I still have a friend from junior high that I don't see him too much. He lives in Tallahassee, but I have several friends from college and graduate school.
Yeah, that's really impressive to me because I'm already at the point in my life where I'm losing contact with people from those periods. So when I interview people and they've managed to maintain friendships actually had someone over the weekend who just reconnected with a second grade classmate. It's always really, really incredible to me. It makes you wonder who's going to stick around in the long term.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about if you had teachers that stood out to you, or even, I know you mentioned some friends already, but like coaches, just people from that period of your life that made an impact.
Well, that was a long time ago for me because I'm 75. So some of those memories are, I remember names of teachers, but being close to them or not, it's hard to say. I definitely remember the ones from my master's program, my doctoral program, and I still socialize with some of those people. And one of the groups used to carried over after I graduated from my master's program. I worked with them in my job when I worked for the government. They were also consultants, and I knew them from my graduate program. So socially, sometimes we get together for meals or drinks or whatever. And several of my professors from my PhD program, they I still know them, and we still socialize briefly, but albeit like retirement things, and they'll be there.
I have this running theory that about half of the purpose of going to college is to make connections with people, be it professors, other students. That's really a huge part of what you're coming away with as much as your education.
Right, it does. And like I said, it did help me with several of the professors who wrote recommendations for me for my master's program for me to get into the doctoral program. They actually lived and worked in Orlando, where I was in my master's program.
Let's start with undergrad and tell me a little bit about so you finished high school, and how did you decide? Was college always something that you knew was in your future, and was it something that your family members expected of you?
I don't know if they expected that. I don't remember them actually saying, we need you to go to college. We want you to go. That was just in my DNA. I wanted to go to college, but I only applied to the University of Florida. That was the only place that I was interested in. And I don't know if I could get in there today with the requirements they have, but it was my favorite state school, and it was far enough away. It was like, at the time, it was like a 5-hour drive from where I was. Although I didn't know, I think I knew 2 guys from my high school who went there. I hardly ever saw them. So it was like going into a new world.
Yes, absolutely. I had a similar experience coming from Pensacola, which is about a 5-hour drive, and I had about 2 people I know. So I'm really familiar with that feeling. And so when you got to college, I'm aware that you were in a fraternity and also ROTC. Can you tell me a little bit about those experiences?
Sure. The fraternity, I didn't join till I was a junior. I think I was like more interested in other things. And eventually a guy that I was in a class with, in one of my statistics class, he said, you should come over and have, rush our fraternity and find out what it's like. So it's really the only one I ever went to. And I'm glad I did, because some of my lifelong friends I made while I was in that fraternity. So I'm sorry, what was the other question? What else did I do?
And I was also asking about
ROTC. Sorry, ROTC you asked about?
Yes.
The all state schools at the time, Florida state schools, were land grant schools, and basically they all required that males go through 2 years of ROTC. So in Florida, they were like our Army and Air Force, and I thought, well, I'll probably get drafted. It was the Vietnam War era. I'll probably get drafted, so I might as well be an officer. So why not go to the advanced ROTC, which is an elective. You didn't have to go to advanced for the junior and senior year. So I did that. You got a monthly stipend of $50, and you got paid to go to summer camp. As it turned out, when the draft came up, my lottery number was like 362 or 3 or something like that. So I wouldn't have been drafted, but it was too late.
Such is life. Yeah, I think that's part of their thought process with the draft. I think the threat of the draft as a way to encourage people to enlist was just as effective as having the draft itself. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, my brother-in-law, in fact, he enlisted in the Navy, so he spent like 4 years on Navy. He was on a carrier, the Enterprise, off the coast of Vietnam, where he had to load ordnances on the Phantom jets that were taking off. So he did that. One of my other friends, the guy I knew from junior high school, who's still a friend, he decided to go into the Coast Guard, which was a good thing for him because he was not really interested in academia, and in fact he failed senior English, and so he didn't graduate on time. And then he went into the Coast Guard 4 years, and when he got out, and he went to school, he went to college at FSU, and he did really well. He got A's, and he was interested in literature and that kind of stuff. Those things changed, but that's how it was for me.
Right. Right. So you had a choice between the Army and the Air Force, and was there anything in particular that drew you to I know you said you wanted to be an officer, but I'm assuming you could be an officer in either. So why the Army and not the Air Force?
I don't know. It just seemed more relevant to me. I was a Boy Scout, so I was in the, we did a lot of field work and hiking and camping outdoors, so I was kind of used to that kind of thing. And I thought, I might as well go that route. But probably the Air Force might have been a little bit different, and maybe I would have gone to flight school or something. I don't know.
But you were more of a boots on the ground kind of person.
I think I was, yeah. Of course, I don't think I ever really expected I'd go to Vietnam. I thought, well, maybe I'll go to Europe, I'll go somewhere else, or because of my background and my degree, language. I had 2 years of German. I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to Germany. Nah, they don't care about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting where people end up because it almost seems random. It's almost, there is no rhyme or reason to where people end up based on their skill set, it seems like. So
yeah, and my friend from Verizon, he ended up being in the Signal Corps, and he ended up going to Germany. He spent a lot of his time tooling around Germany and visiting, pubs and things like that. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute, how did I, why didn't I get in on that train?
Right. Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people who expect to go to Vietnam and end up there, doing these little, I guess I'd call them nicer or less dangerous, less risky assignments. But you never know what you're going to get. So I guess maybe in your case, it was kind of that teenage feeling of immortality where you just didn't fully grasp what that would be like.
Yeah, maybe. There was actually, when I went to Fort Polk, I was at the headquarters at this battalion that I was in, and there was a guy there. He looked very familiar, and we started talking to each other, and it turned out he was a specialist, but he had been my art teacher at Florida. So they got the Post paper. One of the reporters came over, took a picture of us. We were in the Post paper. I'm just pointing out to a picture like we were pretending to look in a book, and they asked me how the class was, which I got a C in because it was very hard. You had to name all these different churches from, like, forget it.
Art class.
Anyway, I said, oh, it was very interesting.
Right.
Anyway,
was that paper the Stars and Stripes, possibly? Do you recall?
No, but they did have that when I was in Vietnam. Occasionally we'd get a chance to read that one, but this was like a local paper for the Post. But then I saw later on that it was picked up by the local town paper. This was like a little town, small town.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of it, but it was in Fort Polk. They pretty much wanted Louisiana, yeah, middle of nowhere.
Is it like Anna? Anyway, sorry. So you are in ROTC at UF, Army ROTC, and you graduated from UF, correct?
Yeah.
And what was your degree?
I got a degree in psychology. I started out being a physics major, but it was like, we really had to work at that, and I think I was not that motivated. So I had liked psychology in high school, although I had kind of a wacky teacher, but I liked the idea of it. So I thought, well, I'll try that route, not knowing that there's not a lot of opportunities with just a bachelor's when you get out. But anyway, nonetheless, I went in with that. That was my degree. So after I had a graduation ceremony.
Right.
And then right after that, I went and put my uniform on and went to the commissioning ceremony and got my second lieutenant bar. That was like in December of '69.
Okay.
Then the next month, like in January, I was ordered to active duty, so I had to go fly to Oakland, catch a plane there, and fly to Vietnam.
Wow. So as far as your basic training, because
I take that back. Take that back. That's the wrong sequence. I forgot. I left off the basic training, infantry officer training, and
Right.
near the stateside stuff. It was in this, but it was a January, but it was the next January that I went to the end. So I got that out of order.
I see, I see. But I get why that. So do you remember where you did your basic training?
Yes, it was at Fort Benning in Georgia.
Okay. And
Basically, most officers have to go to some kind of training, like it could be armor, it could be finance, whatever. Mine was infantry officer, so we got to stay in these barracks on the post for 3 months. That was like January to March.
and did you do jump school at Fort Benning?
No, actually, I thought about it. I thought about ranger school, jump school. I thought I didn't know if I was cut out for that. You kind of have to be in pretty good physical shape for those kind of things.
Right.
So I thought, well, I think I'll just go and do this. Stick to the basic. So it was like, all right. I met a couple of guys there. They were a lot of fun. I'd go visit my girlfriend who lived. She was going to school at FSU in Tallahassee. So sometimes I'd drive down there and visit her.
Was it?
So after that training, go ahead.
I was going to ask if it was sort of a culture shock. I've heard other veterans who were pretty surprised, when you get off the bus for the first time and someone's in your face yelling at you already. Was that your experience, or as an officer, was it a commissioned officer, was it a little different?
I think it was different because there were other officers who went through OCS, Officer Candidate School, which is 90-day stuff, and they had to start out as either enlisted or maybe a non-commissioned officer or something to that effect. And they probably had it a little rougher. I don't remember being yelled at. They would be just, you had to do this, you had to follow that. They expected you to be civil and.
So
The only thing I remember getting I got chewed out one time when I was in ROTC because my mustache was too big. One of the majors came all the way across the parade field and got in my face and said, "Mr. Hall, what are you doing with this mustache? It's way out of regulation." It really wasn't that big, but apparently it can only go to the end of your lip, the end of your mouth and stuff like that. So I took that as like, yeah, that's my repudiation.
So did you guys have to do like KP and stuff like that as officers?
We did that in summer camp. When I went to ROTC summer camp, we had to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That was my junior or senior year, I forgot which. And basically, we had to peel potatoes. We had to do mop floors and clean latrines and all kind of fun stuff like that. But when I was an officer, I didn't have to do that. We had to do basic, take care of your own stuff. Go through inspections, and you had to polish your boots and shine your belt buckles and all that junk.
Right.
Make sure you had to iron your uniform and so forth.
So, okay. So then from Fort Benning, you go to Fort Polk, and you also did jungle warfare school, right?
Yeah, right. And in fact, while I was at Fort Benning, they had a lot of, all this was loaded up with classwork and courses and outdoor stuff. So you had to learn how to fire, at the time it was a bazooka, but it's like a recoilless rifle. You'd shoot at a tank in this field. And you had to go through, I don't think maybe once or twice fired a rifle, so I had to qualify. I think when I was in ROTC, qualify with an M14. I made expert on that. And then when I was in the Army, I think I had to do the M16, and then get qualified with that as well.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, Fort Polk was after that. Basically, anytime you go between duty stations, you get maybe a week or so of leave. So I went back to Miami and then loaded up my record player and stuff and drove to Fort Polk. I was the company executive officer in this light to heavy duty vehicle training class. Basically, they drove these big deuce-and-a-half trucks or bigger trucks, like an 18-wheeler kind of trucks.
Right.
I didn't do the training, but we basically, the people who came there, some of them were National Guard or reservists. They would come to the training center where I was, and we would basically house them. And then during the day, they would go to the school and be trained and then come back at night and so forth, and then go from there. So I was there for until November, from January to, roughly March or April to November or something like that.
Okay.
It wasn't too bad, but there was nothing to do there, and I had to live in a trailer because there was no permanent housing because it was a temporary place. They only ramped up after Vietnam started. Basically, probably I think closed down when there's no major military, campaigns going on anywhere.
So you got that as because you were an officer, and then your regular enlisted people would be in barracks there, or was it just all trailers?
Well, we had people who lived they had a permanent party that lived somewhere, either I did. They lived off post, what I did. First, I lived in a bachelor officer quarter or on post, met this guy and his friend, and then we got a trailer off post. So these permanent parties, they would be every company had a company commander who was either a first lieutenant or a captain, and then they'd have sergeants for each of the classes. They might have 3 classes going on, so they have 2 or 3 sergeants, and they have a first sergeant, and they probably hardly any of them lived on post, but somebody had to be there during the night to stay with the troops. But those troops stayed I don't remember now, 3 months maybe or something in training. They lived in barracks. We'd have to go inspect the barracks to make sure they were shipshape. But I didn't stay there. Sometimes you had to be the duty officer, and you had to go down to battalion headquarters and spend the night there, and then go out during the night and stop at each of the companies and check them out and make sure there was no issues, and make sure that everything was policed in the morning and pick up trash and things like that.
Did you ever have anyone get into any trouble, any antics that you had to correct?
Yeah, every once in a while, when I was a duty officer, sometimes there was some kind of, I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but something was going on in one of the companies. So I had the Jeep driver drive me over there, and it turns out that the XO officer was somebody I knew at this company, and somebody was having some dispute with another person, another soldier, and they were either fighting or whatever. So, but that's the only thing I remember offhand that was out of the ordinary. It was pretty much, it's just boring. There's nothing to do. My friend and I would go to the officers club, and we'd dance with the waitresses because there weren't any women around.
Right.
I think I met someone in the town. She worked at a dry cleaning store. We went out once or something. That was about it. My parents came to visit me one time. I'm sure that was eye-opener for them.
At Fort Polk or Benning?
Fort Polk.
Wow. And yeah, since you brought up your parents, I wanted to ask how they felt. I mean, at this time, you didn't know you were going to Vietnam yet, right?
I didn't know right away. Yeah, I didn't get the orders until I was at Fort Polk, and I forget how long I was there. But you get this printed list, and list you and a bunch of other people on this list. You report at such and such a location at such and such a time and stuff like that. But before I touch on that, I want to mention the Jungle Warfare School.
Sure.
That's not something I picked to do, but that was so after Fort Polk, I went back to Miami, spent a week there or whatever, and then I had previously gotten orders to go to Panama for a 10-day training in the Jungle Warfare School, which is kind of weird because that jungle was nothing like Vietnam. Different kinds of trees, different kinds of stuff, but you learn the same kind of thing. You had to go learn the lay of the land, how to live off the land, how to engage in, military operations and that kind of stuff. Because they have a group there that would attack us, and we'd have to fight back and that kind of stuff. And then we have to go on a night compass course, an all-night compass course in the jungle, in the dark. That's what I remember the most. But I got the jungle expert badge from being there.
Right.
But there was a lot of written tests as well. You had to take tests, and you had to do this course, get graded on each of these course things. Anyway, so my parents, you asked about that.
Yes.
They said when they found out I was going to Vietnam, they were not happy about that.
Right.
They asked me, did I have to go? It's that kind of thing. And then when I was over there, I would hear later from them that they would basically hide articles. It'd be something in the Miami Herald about my division being attacked, people being killed or whatever, and they would hide it from each other. And I sometimes cry about it, I think, is what I heard them saying. But they were pretty good about, I think they were just really worried because you don't find out, if you try to send a letter, it takes like weeks to get there and back. You get a reply back. And they had some phone service, but there was like really long lines if you were trying to call home or something like that. So I didn't do that. So it was just like, letters, you kind of rely on that. But every once in a while, somebody had an audio tape recorder and I would record a message, send it off, and then my dad would send something back.
Wow.
I get to hear their voices.
That's really, I actually haven't heard of that before with the tape recorders. That probably wasn't a very common thing for people to have.
No, it just so happened that somebody in my platoon had one, and he let me use a tape and record a message. Wow. And then they mailed it back. One good thing about the mail service there is the letters from Vietnam were all free. You didn't have to pay any postage, that kind of stuff. You just, they send it airmail. But it was just, you had to if you're out in the field, you had to get the letter back to the rear area. They had to ship it off. It had to go wherever else and then get over to the U.S., make its way to Miami and stuff. So it would probably take, weeks before it got there and everything came back. But the nice thing that my parents would send me like goodies in the mail. And occasionally I would get like stuff, because the food there, we ate sea rations all the time. Mm-hmm. And these dehydrated meals, which were pretty bad. So you need something to enhance the flavor. So I pleaded for like Tabasco sauce and, cookies and, other kind of things like that, pound cakes and chocolate and that kind of stuff.
I've definitely heard of people saying their mom would, make brownies and send them for them to share. And so, yeah, I can imagine after eating, I've only had a couple MRIs in my life, but I couldn't imagine living off of it for a year.
No, in fact, this friend of mine that I knew from when I worked at, probably 3 or 4 years ago, he gave me one of these MREs, meals ready to eat. They were nothing like what we had. Those were good. You could actually save those, but the ones we had, you had to like heat a pot, heat your canteen cup over these little heat tabs. You make a little stove out of a old sea ration can and punch holes in it. Put this heat tab in there, light it because it's smokeless, but it was hot. You heat your water, pour the water into this bag of maybe spaghetti. You seal it up, stir it up, and let it steep for 5 minutes, and then you'd eat it.
Yum.
But it was better than eating sea rations. Their sea rations were like just axe.
Yeah.
The only thing good there was like the sweet things, like pound cake if you got that, or they have this stuff we used to call it pork and shrapnel, which is like some kind of pork and I don't even know what it was. Potatoes or something.
Was that a favorite for people?
Huh?
Did you have a favorite?
I like the spaghetti. They had spaghetti in one of those, we call them LRPs, long range rations or whatever they were called. Mm. But we didn't have as many of those as we had sea rations. You had to carry enough for at least 5 to 7 days, plus all the water, because we were out there in the boonies.
Right.
There's no McDonald's or anything. You just bop up to, I'll take a burger and a chocolate shake.
I bet you would have killed for a burger and a chocolate shake.
Yeah, when I got the chance, we didn't get to the rear very much, but occasionally when we do, I would go to the officers club and get a scotch and a cheeseburger. That was my thing.
Mm. So just to keep our chronology going here, so you go to Fort Polk, you go to Panama, and how did you actually travel to Vietnam? I know we kind of went over this earlier, but.
Yeah, basically, I got the orders, of course, before all that, saying that I had to go on a certain date. And I looked back at my paperwork and it said like January 3rd. I kept thinking it was around New Year's Day or something, but I had to fly from Miami to Oakland Air Base. And I flew on at that time they had National Airlines was was before it went bankrupt. And the guy that I mentioned earlier, that was my cousin who flew in the Korean War. He used to fly what they call boxcars. You could see sometimes pictures of them and 2 fuselages, and then dump the equipment out the back, parachutes, stuff like that. Anyway, he was a pilot, commercial airline pilot. So he and I ended up being on the same plane, and we sat next to each other on the way to Vietnam. And he flew what they called MACV, Military Airlift Command, or whatever, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He flew the planes to and from, like say, Oakland to Vietnam and back, bringing troops back, taking them over. He flew those planes. So we talked a while. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, that was basically it. We had to play this game on they had this thing called a beam mount Baldy that you could guess. This is on the National Airlines flight. If you could guess, they could give you your airspeed and the location and how far you were from this mountain called Mount Baldy. If you got the right answer, you got a bottle of champagne. So he and I both won a bottle. I didn't cheat off of him. I didn't look over his paper or anything. I just figured it out.
Wow.
I kept that bottle and I drank it probably like months later.
Yeah, I bet. Anytime something good happens, little victories.
Well, I had to store it it was stored in the rear somewhere. I kept it in a briefcase. They're probably there for I don't know how many months. Finally, I broke it out one day and we were in the rear. And I got a chance. When I say rear, that's our base camp. We had a base camp in Phu Bai. Phu Bai was one of the base camps around the city of Hue. Hue was the ancient capital of Vietnam, Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. So you arrived in Vietnam. Do you remember the name of you didn't fly into Saigon, right? You arrived at a different airbase?
No. It's airbase that was south of Saigon. It was Bien Hoa Air Base is what I remember. They had a big naval facility there, Cam Ranh Bay. Yes. I'm pretty sure I remember looking out the plane window, you could see it in the clouds, and it looked like, any other country, just a lot of green. Mm-hmm. So we landed at Bien Hoa Air Base, and then they put us on these transport planes, and we flew to upcountry, which is like there were 4, they call them corps, 4 corps, and I think we were in the first corps. I can't remember which one was which, but anyway, we're up in the northern part of South Vietnam. Not that close to the DMZ, but somewhere up there, north of Da Nang.
Right.
Anyway, so we flew up there. They took us to this place called Camp, I thought it was called Camp Eagle. And basically, we went through like a 3 or 4 days or so of orientation. So you learned the lay of the land, how, what you might have to do. Met a bunch of other lieutenants that were there, captains maybe, who were coming in country. And then we had barracks and stuff like that. And they would take us out and they'd go through like some classroom demonstrations or practical exercises. I remember in Panama, I had learned how to rappel, even though I never actually did that in Vietnam, but I guess you could be in mountainous terrain, you might need to rappel down a cliffside or something like that. But in Panama, we just did it down a waterfall, which is that's pretty weird. But in this camp, we rappelled out of helicopters. So they just pick you up, 5 or 6 guys in there, and then you make what they call a Swiss seat, and you clamp this harness on it, and you learn to lower yourself down out of the helicopter. Because actually they did insertions sometimes that way. There was no landing zone. You had to get out of the helicopter. We didn't. I never had to do that. But the reconnaissance patrols, they'd send these reconnaissance patrols out, maybe 5 guys. They would pick them up and take them out maybe at night. They'd be hanging at the bottom on these harnesses, and they'd just drop them, lower them enough so they could get off, and then they'd pick them up the same way. Sometimes we'd see them on the fire base. Hear this coming in the distance. There's these 5 things hanging from the bottom of the helicopter. Until you saw what it was 5 guys in their fatigue and with their packs and everything else hanging from the bottom. They'd take it to the fire base, drop them off. So anyway, we never had to do the rappelling.
Yeah. Well, I hope you weren't scared of heights.
No, you kind of get used to it. It's just one of the things because we did a lot of helicopter missions. That's how we got around because there weren't a lot of roads that, I think we had one or two missions where we actually were driven by truck and went somewhere. Otherwise, it was always helicopters. So I had so many helicopter missions, I actually got an air medal. You get like 25 missions, you get an air medal. So we had more than that, I'm sure. I probably could have gotten two. You stay for like a week or two in the jungle, and they pick you up and move you somewhere else.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your assignment and your general day-to-day. And actually, sorry, one thing I first wanted to ask about. What were your first impressions? I know in this this document that you sent me, you mentioned hearing the mortars for like pretty constantly when you arrived.
Yeah, when I was at Camp Eagle, they would have everything has to be, in a perimeter or some kind of thing with security, barbed wire, etc., and bunkers all around the outside of it. Everything is like that I recall. Mm-hmm. So basically, they have like a night defensive stuff going on. They have artillery batteries and they have mortar batteries at every one of these places, and they have like targets they would fire, or maybe they would be random, or they might get a fire mission where they have to, somebody sighted somebody, enemy or whatever, and they give them coordinates. Anyway, they'd be a thump and a boom,
right.
Or it was a howitzer. Sometimes, and even on the fire bases, they'd be doing nighttime fire missions all the time.
Right.
I don't know how people could even sleep with that because you hear them going. They make a lot of noise, especially the big howitzers, because they have like three 105s or 3 155 howitzers, millimeter howitzers. They make a lot of noise.
And then there would be people assigned to these posts overnight to, I guess, respond to like forward observers and stuff calling in fire, but then also to just generally guard and protect from attack.
Yeah, they would be a separate kind of thing. Like if you had the major fire bases, like Fubai was that way. And sometimes we'd actually have to go and share bunkers, alternating bunkers with the ARVN, the Army of Republic of Vietnam. They would be a group of 20 or whatever, 10 next to us with their chickens and a bunch of stuff, making a lot of noise. And we'd be in ours about, 50 feet away doing guard duty and stuff. But we weren't calling the missions. Every fire base or base camp had its own artillery and their own artillery people that worked with it.
Okay.
Although in the field, we were on a company level. We have a company commander would travel with his people, and each of the platoons, he would take turns rotating with them because he'd have a group of cadre of like 5 people. He would have like a radio operator with a special scrambler radio that he could communicate with the battalion over a secured, but it was scrambled, so you couldn't listen in unless you had the equivalent equipment. And he would have a lieutenant who was in the artillery branch. He would travel with them, and he would be the coordinator for the company level. But each platoon also had their own, who was like a sergeant. So I had a sergeant who was affiliated with the artillery, and if I needed a fire mission, I would talk to him, and he would call his people. They have to scramble it all in a little shackle wheel. They give them your coordinates. You have to spin this little wheel, and every day it's a different code, so that when you send it, you don't send the number and your coordinates in the clear.
Right.
Anyway, so I had a guy like that with me.
So I don't think that we've gone over yet what your day-to-day, your duty was when you were assigned there. So if you could just briefly describe what your major role was at the Camp Eagle.
Well, this is after Camp Eagle. That was just 3 or 4 days. That was just for like orientation. And after that, then I was assigned to the 101st Airborne, I call them a regiment, but it was more like a brigade. So mine was like the first of the 502nd. So it was like the equivalent, I guess, would be like a brigade, and then the brigade would have several battalions. And under the battalions, you'd have companies, then the platoons. That's the structure. So I got assigned to this first of the file, and they have their own camp within Fubai. Fubai had maybe several different brigades. So that was was that the brigade? I'm trying to remember what the distinction was between the brigade and the battalion. Anyway, so I was assigned to Company A of this regiment, or battalion, if you will, first of the 502nd, I guess. Anyway, long story short, there were like five platoons. One was like a special reconnaissance platoon, and then there was 4 infantry platoons, so infantry companies. So A, B, C, D, E, or 5 companies, each one with multiple platoons in each one. Anyway, so long story short, so I had Company A, and I was like the first platoon leader, and there were 2 other platoon leaders and a company commander, etc. And we basically had a barracks that was our headquarters in Fubai, that every time we came back to the rear, we had a place, but no one had a designated place to sleep unless you worked there permanently, like the first sergeant, that's where he was, and supply sergeant, people like that, they stayed in there. Everyone else was in the field. We're alternating to and from the field or fire base or something like that. So I think I had like 35 men, 35 or 40, and maybe 3 squads, something maybe 4. And each one had up to 10 guys in it. And each guy there would be a sergeant E5 or E6 or something like that in charge of them. They'd have their own radio operator. They have a guy with a machine gunner, a guy with what we call it a thump gun, which is like a grenade launcher. Mm. And that's what basically the main structure was. So in my unit, my little cadre, I had the platoon sergeant that traveled with me, a medic, the radio operator, and the forward observer, who was that sergeant I mentioned before. So every day we had to go on a recon somewhere. So we'd have a mission, we'd meet with the company commander, sometimes we'd fly over the area, all the platoon leaders and the company commander would fly over in a helicopter, and they'd say, here's where there's enemy activity, da, 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 da. We're going to be doing this, you're going to have this area, and then this platoon is going to have that area, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So then we go back to the base, we load up all our people. Did you have a question?
No.
We load up everybody, and we get like 6 or 7 helicopters with 5 or 6 guys each, with all your packs, with all your stuff, like a poncho liner, your change of socks. You have people carry an ammo box because it was waterproof, and keep your lighters and anything else if you didn't want to get wet, because they were like monsoon seasons where it was raining every day, all the time, all day long, for weeks at a time. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get wet. Anyway, you'd have your steel pot you carry. Usually we didn't wear it unless we were going in and out of on a mission. We'd wear our steel pots, but we just carried them anywhere. And a boonie hat, keep the rain off your face. Carry your M16 and bandolier of weapons, hand grenades, shovel, machete, those kind of fun things. Some of the packs must weigh like 100 pounds or so.
I was gonna say,
with all the junk you had to carry. And especially the guy who had to carry the radio, the scrambler thing, that itself weighed 40 pounds or something. So he had to be like a mule to be able to carry, because you have to carry the stuff up and down all these trails. You'd hike up, and then you go back down again. You go to a river or a creek or something, you follow that river. You might have to cut your own trails, which is the safest way to go.
Right.
So anyway, you'd be out in the field for like a week or 2 at a time. You get maybe resupplied every 5 days, unless the weather was bad, then you would miss a few days. Some days they just dump the stuff out of the helicopter. Every great once in a while, you get like a hot meal. They drop these canisters out with like turkey and gravy and stuff like that. Mm. That was like to kill for kind of stuff. You hardly ever got that because you're always eating. I think I lost like 30 or 40 pounds while I was over there. Yeah. Anyway, well, it was hot for one thing, and when it's hot and muggy, you don't feel like eating all this stuff. So anyway, we do that. We'd hike during the day. find a location where we set up, basically. And every day you had to move like 300 meters. And 300 meters in the jungle is not easy to do, especially if there's bamboo and things like that. And you have to cut through it. And you cut the bamboo and it doesn't move. You have to like cut it in 3 or 4 places and then like drag it out of the way because it's all interspersed with vines and junk like that. Anyway, it's a pain in the butt. So we'd hike during the day, we'd stop, and then we sent out a reconnaissance patrol. So one patrol would be like, one squad. And there would be like as I described before, the sergeant and his whatever guy. Each squad would have a point man and a drag man. The point man would go first, and he would look for signs of enemy, or wait, it's the other way around. I think he would look for booby traps, because there were booby traps on the trails. He would look for some disturbed area where there was, like, especially on the other side of a log, he had to cross over, the favorite place for them. They'd put a mortar, they would get some of our mortar rounds, put a shotgun shell underneath it as a trigger device, and a hole. If you step on it, it would set off the charge and then blow your foot off, which happened to some, one of the Florida observers that went with the captain. He lost both his legs. He stood on a rock and he thought it was safe, and it was a howitzer round underneath it. It's what I heard. So then that was it for him. He survived, but anyway, long story short. So every day we go, no one said you got to do this, but this is what I understood my mission was, to go with the platoon, the reconnaissance squad, and we go to search out, like, so maybe we thought there was something on the trail here, or there was several times we found like weapons hidden in the sides of a riverbank, or we'd find signs that somebody was there, or we'd find a body of Vietnamese that was, in the area of BC that was buried, that was killed in some firefighter or artillery, I don't know what, anyway. So we had to go, and every day, then we'd move to that location. The squad would come back, everyone would pack up their stuff, we'd move there. I'd have to give like our coordinates every day. You have to tell headquarters where you were. And you have to plan like where defensive fire at night. So you have you pick a prominent position or something like that. So if you got attacked at night, you call in your artillery from that location. And sometimes it's hard to find your way. If you didn't find like a landmark, there were like 2 mountains near us where you used it. If you could see one or both, you could shoot a back azimuth to it and to the other one, and do cross on your map, you find where the crosshairs were. Basically, that's where you were.
Right.
You'd have to send your location every night where you were. Anyway, so that was always fun. Sometimes you couldn't tell where you were, and I had to call for what they call marking rounds. Is this too much detail?
No, not at all.
Okay. You have to call for marking rounds, and the marking rounds were this white phosphorus rounds. They would fire and they would explode in the air, but you could see them. There'd be it's literally white phosphorus.
The base would fire them.
The fire base. You actually had two or more fire bases in the area that supported you. And sometimes you'd go and stay on those fire bases. They'd have bunkers built into the hills, but they would have an area where they would get helicopters would bring in supplies for them, and they would also have an area where their artillery was. So they usually have like either 3 howitzers or maybe 3 105s or 3 155 howitzers, which are the big guys. They might have 2 batteries at each of these fire bases. They were the ones getting the fire missions. And they'd be firing all night in support of all these troops that are out there in the field somewhere. Every platoon had to have this 3 basically defensive plots where you could call in from there. So if you got hit, you'd say, oh, from this location, drop so many meters, add so many left or right from there, and bring in the rounds in wherever you need it. I think we had to do that maybe once or twice, where we actually had to call in live artillery.
Right, and that's when you're out in the field and you're calling in the coordinates for them to launch this attack on, correct? Yeah.
So that basically you already have them. You'd have them set up that for that night. So if you got attacked at night, you could call them in from there. You could call them down anytime until you moved to a new location. So you'd have to, like I said, move every 300 meters every day to a new location. You couldn't stay in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to a place and you find wood. If this is a wood, the jungle, you can find a lot of wood. You basically pound 2 stakes in the ground and maybe a cross piece, and you snap 2 poncho halves together, and you and your bunkmate would hang in there. So my radio operator and I always were together. I always had a radio operator. So overnight we'd stay in that, and we cook our meals and whatever else. And then at night we'd have to get up and take turns doing radio watch. Everybody had to do radio watch for like an hour.
Right.
Each squad had their own radio. And then we'd have to check in with the company commander, wherever he was. So it was like a hierarchical thing. The company commander, he would talk to the battalion, and the company would talk to the platoons.
Right.
And I would talk to the squads. So we did all that stuff, and then once I was where I was with this one. So anyway, so we'd stay in the jungle for 3 or 4 weeks maybe, and then maybe we would go to a fire base. The fire base at least had a shower, a cold shower. You could take a shower there, and they would sometimes have a hot meal, and you sleep in a bunker with rats. That was a lot of fun. And you hear the howitzers firing all night long. They had mortars and fire. Sometimes we could see another fire base in one instance. Fire base from in distance getting mortared by somebody over here on this ridge line. So we watched our battery crank up their howitzers and try to knock this guy out. But the time he was done firing, it's just a nuisance kind of thing.
Right.
But occasionally, I think in the years past, that fire base had been attacked. They call them like sappers in the wire. With the VC would be, they creep under the wire. They have these bamboo stuff with explosives, and they would blow up things. That didn't happen when we were there. When I was there, it was after Tet, which is in '68. So that was a really rough time. So when I was there, it was '71. So I was there from like January of '71 until October or so. Anyway, so I'm jumping around a little bit, but basically you have these missions and you go, they take you off there, you go to a fire base sometimes maybe once every month or 2, you go to the rear area and you have what they call stand down, which is where like refresher training, you could get clean pair of clothes, you could eat in the cafeteria there, and socialize. They'd have shows. Sometimes they have these Korean and other groups, Filipinos, would come in and do shows in like a common area, and they play rock and roll music, with an accent. But it was something anyway, and that's where I would go. I met this guy who was the company B next to me. He was their XO. He and I would hang out, and we would go to the old club and we would drink. We would go to these shows together. But it was rare that I could be there and do all this stuff.
Do you think?
But it was nice because you could get a hot shower.
Did you have a sense of normalcy during these like downtime moments, or was there always kind of a heightened sense of anxiety? Well,
it was easier for me because they never expected much of me. I think my platoon sergeant, the company first sergeant, which basically took over when the men came back. They said, "Here's, you need to do this, you do that." And I would see them around, but I didn't sleep where they slept. They would find a bunk somewhere in they had these, what they call hooches, which is basically a wood frame building with like a metal roof or something like that, screened in around it. And if you just plop down wherever you could find one that somebody wasn't there, you'd hang out and that's your bunk. So most of the time it was all right. Every once in a while there was an incident at these shows. One guy was throwing beer cans at somebody there. Other time there was like a knife fight. Some people would rather not be in the rear area because there's more stuff going on. And I think I mentioned when I wrote about this, I said that I didn't lose anybody, nobody got killed, but one guy, I remember, I didn't even know him. He had just been assigned in my platoon, and he was something weird about it. He was causing problems and punched somebody, and I didn't even know he was in my platoon. for a long time. But anyway, he was shot in a bar in the rear area. He was hiding behind the bar, but somebody got a M16 and opened up in there. After the bartender was seeing his Vietnamese girlfriend, I don't know what, but anyway, this guy was hiding behind the bar and took a round in the chest and died.
Wow.
I never even saw the guy, so I never met him. But anyway, that's the odd crap that's going on in the rear. So one time, there was another episode where I'm trying to sleep because we were there. You get to stay. You might stay there for maybe 3 or 4, maybe even a week. You do training, stuff like that. But I didn't have to do a lot. The sergeants took over. I didn't have to. But this one night, I remember this one guy said, "I'm going to kill you." You could hear like people running around outside of where I was sleeping. "I'm going to kill you," and whatever. And there was quite a bit of commotion. So I got my boots on. I didn't even lace them up. I don't even know if I have my rank on my collar. I might have just been wearing, because usually you don't wear, in the field, you don't wear any insignia because you don't want to attract attention.
It's targeted.
I would just be plain, just a plain, nothing on it. Anyway, we go out. I went out around and there was like 50 to 100 people all crowded around these two guys who were fighting. This is like 2 a.m. or something. And one guy was a white guy with a club or like a big long stick. I don't know where he got it from. He was threatening this black guy, and they were going at it. So like a fool, I tried to get in between the two of them, push them aside, and stop them from fighting. The next thing I know, somebody's grabbing my arms and pulling me backwards. And I thought, "Oh crap, what's going to happen? Am I going to get hit?" And it turned out it was my radio operator. He recognized me, and he was trying to protect me. He said, because this guy was swinging this thing wildly, and anyhow, the black guy ended up knocking out, punching the white guy, knocking him out. White guy was the one with the stick. He was all cold on the ground, and prior to all this, I was trying to get everyone to leave. Nobody was leaving. So I went to one of the other headquarters, and I asked them to call MPs. So the MPs came, but everything was already over with.
Right.
Anyway, so that was not a fun episode.
Right.
I didn't have to do anything, but I said, take this guy, 2 guys, pick up the guy who was knocked out, take him to the medic, to the clinic. And that was it. That was into that. I don't know what ever happened after that.
It's really interesting that you would think in a war zone, people on the downtime that they have in the rear would be sort of enjoying the relative peace, but it almost seems like there was still such high tensions that it didn't really make a difference.
Yeah, there was some kind of racial things maybe going on. I didn't ever see that, but they, the blacks had their little thing where they would get together and they would have this thing called passing the dap, where they would like do this thing with their fists and that kind of stuff, and bumping elbows and things like that. It's like I thought it was amusing to let them do it, but they never hassled me. I never got like called out, because frankly, I think what I tried to do was, whatever I asked my men to do, I would do. So if we had to do radio watch, I did radio watch. If we had to fill sandbags, which a while we'd go to a fire base. To the one fire base, there was a bridge across it, and they needed sandbags. So I filled sandbags. If they went on patrol, I went on patrol.
Right.
With them. Every time the patrol went out, I went with them. So on top of all that, I just remembered to the other thing. All these helicopter missions, that was my job, was to go in on the first helicopter to the landing zone and be the last one out. Mm-hmm. So you'd be up there flying around. I might be jumping around a little bit, flying around in 6 or 7 helicopters, and you're watching this place on the ground, which is your landing zone that you're going to go to. And all of a sudden, it's like they're firing it up. Artillery rounds. They're firing a battery at this place where you're going to land, because they don't know what's there, but there might be, enemy there, and they want to, neutralize this landing zone so you can land there. Right. Or maybe you hover off the ground, and you jump off the skid of the helicopter, and you go from there. But that's kind of harrowing, because you're up there in the air with your 60 pounds of crap on your back, and the helicopter's banking and doing all this, thinking, oh God, am I going to fall out? And then you come in, and then each helicopter had door gunners, one on either side. They would start firing, but they're not going to tell you they're going to do this. They just start shooting, and you're thinking, like, what's happening? So, yeah, after a while you get used to it, but then you don't know if you're taking fire or that's, and all their empty cartridges are hitting you in the head, coming off the machine guns, and they start firing up, and then a helicopter either lands or gets closer, and you jump out with your 5 guys, and you go for cover. And then the next helicopter comes in, and they go over here. So that's how almost every mission was that.
Wow.
So it's a little hairy when you don't know what you're going into. So you asked me, did I lose? Did somebody I know die over there? One of the guys that was in my orientation class, he was killed in one of those kind of missions. Where he went into a live zone where I don't know how many people, but a number of them really were killed.
Right. And that was a helicopter landing where you're kind of jumping out into not totally jumping, but sort of rappelling really into this kind of like.
Yeah, we didn't have to. We didn't have to repel. We basically, the helicopter, we either land with the skids down and you jump, you'd step out, jump out, or if they couldn't land because the ground was too rough, you would jump off the skid maybe 3 or 4 feet or something like that.
Right.
But we didn't have to repel off of that. So
okay, I see what you're talking about. Those are the little, like instead
but the
of
reconnaissance. They had reconnaissance squads. They would do that. They would go for a long period of time, and they'd be like, with their camouflage, their faces black and stuff like that. They'd be in, like, they go way out into the jungle. There's one valley they called Ashaw Valley. They would go out there because there was a lot of heavy enemy presence there. Mm-hmm. So some of the people we lost were in those kind of things. But that wasn't my group. That was the reconnaissance company. They had their own guys there.
Mm. How did you handle that kind of news and these things that you hear through the grapevine while you're there? I mean, did it really did it affect you at the time, or were you just sort of desensitized to it?
You kind of get desensitized. It's like, this is what happens. You get upset about it when you see people. Like I saw them bring in like 5 body bags to the fire base one time. That's upsetting.
Right.
Because there were these reconnaissance guys that got either ambushed or overrun or whatever, and they had to go and recover them. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't. And then I thought there was one guy I met who was actually in my they call it IOBC, the Infantry Officer Basic Class. He and I were lieutenants at the time, and I found out later on he made like Major General. He stayed in the service. His dad was in the service, but I saw him one time at some I don't remember what it was, some kind of a standout kind of thing. His face was pockmarked, and so I asked him what happened. He said he walked into a booby trap, and they permanently disfigured his face. Like black powder looked like crevices, like a really bad case of acne. Mm-hmm. I remember his name was Grange or something. So anyway, part of my mission thing, I stayed. So I was in the jungle doing all this kind of stuff. I got to go on R&R. I picked Sydney because every place else didn't appeal to me. You could go to like Bangkok or Hong Kong or something like that, but I went to Sydney.
Australia.
And Australia, yeah, for a week. And that's my friend, this guy that I knew from one of my classes. He and I hooked up together. We went to these places, and they had places for like GIs only, the GI club, but the women could come there. So we hung out there. You could either do that or go to live with a family in the outback. I thought, yeah, that's not so much fun. So anyway, I did that. Met somebody there, and she and I wrote letters for a long time after. Mm. And it was that was kind of a story. There's a whole other story around that. But anyway, so I went. One time we were ambushed, and I got a shrapnel, so I had to go to the hospital. They evacuated me out of that. But I went back to the field afterwards, even though I think I had an infection in my leg for like 2 weeks or something like that from the shrapnel. But And toward the end of that assignment, then I got another assignment. The last 2 months I was there, to be like the commander of a security element, I guess you could say, on this place called Eagle Beach, which was like in the South China Sea. And it was a stand-down place where our troop went there. And they'd have shows, like I described before, and hot food and stuff like that. But I had my own private hooch, and a Vietnamese woman who came and cleaned it up every day. And my job was to make sure that the bunker line that I supported was manned all the time. So we had like 20, probably 30 or 40 guys that were under my command. And I had a permanent group that worked there, that ran the radio and so forth. And it was on this island. Part of the island had another company controlled it. I think it was a transportation company or something. But on this big island, there was these huge tanks, jet fuel tanks. And we were guarding that, essentially. And then the troops would also come in there for shows, and they would stay in these barracks on this island. And you could swim, and they'll actually swim in the ocean, which was fun. I got to do that once in a while. Met some people there that were from the Navy CBs. They were a construction battalion. I actually had them work for me. I gave them a couple 6-packs of beer to help them straighten out this fence. The fence was down. I mean, the gate was down. The gate was all bent and off to the side. And I thought, that's not safe. So I asked them to take their bulldozers. They straightened it out and put it back up. So that was a lot of fun. But there were some incidents there, like, a guy refused to leave, so I had to call the MPs to come and take him away, and he threatened me.
Refused to
got a hold of me.
On patrol or on going
Say
back?
Again?
Did he refuse to leave like he was supposed to go out on a patrol, or?
No, he was the troops there had to man the bunker, so they had 3 or 4 guys in each bunker, and they took turns during the night. But somebody had to be awake all the time.
Right.
They were there during the day, during the night. So I would go out anywhere from 2 to 4 in the morning by myself, most of the time. Either I'd walk or I'd take this thing called a mule and drive it around. And I would check on them. And if they were sleeping, I'd send them back. They'd have to go back to their unit and go back to the field. They didn't like that. But it happened so many times, I had to relent. I had to say, I can't keep sending people back. So I give them 1 or 2 chances before that would happen. But
right.
I think they got the message that they weren't supposed to be. You need to stay awake, because that people's lives are depending on you,
right,
for security and so forth.
Did you ever have like any reason to think, or any incidents where there were like sappers or other VC or NVA incursions there?
Not where I was, and they didn't happen where I was, although there was opportunities to do that, especially when we had no gate, people sleeping on the thing, and because at either end of this perimeter, there were 2 villages, one village on either side, like north and south of us. And people were coming in and out. That's where the people who worked during the day would live in these villages. They were fishing villages or whatever else, but oftentimes our water supply came from this one, I can't remember if that was south or north of us. But anyway, these villagers would cut our pipes and use them for their houses, as a post for their houses. So sometimes the night the water would be cut off, and it's like, what's going on with that?
Oh no!
So part of what we're supposed to do was secure that. Well, they couldn't be out in the village at night, but sometimes we'd send a squad out, 3 or 4 guys armed, to check on this thing. You'd think they'd have some more sophisticated way to find out when you have to saw into this pipe. That would happen periodically. That was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
That stuff. Plus, there were women of ill repute in the village, and a lot of the people were trying to get out of the compound to go have their fun in the evening. Mm-hmm. Well, my job, I thought, was I'm keeping this secure, so I wouldn't let them out. And they get upset with me. Maybe they'd go during the day or not, but that's my job. I'm not going to let them out there.
Right.
You figure that out some other way. Occasionally, I'd see people. My own troop came there. My own platoon came there for stand-up. My own company, I should say. And so I got to visit with them.
Mm.
And then, anyway, so I was there for like 2 months, did all that kind of stuff. There was always some incident going on, but it wasn't that bad. And I got to take a shower, and eat cold, warm food, hot food, and then
Feel
eventually,
like human again.
okay, your time's up, and now you can pack your stuff, and you can pick me up in a helicopter and take me back.
Mm.
Oh, I thought one of the other things I forgot to tell you that they would rotate the pay officer role between the different platoon leaders. So I got to do that periodically. It seemed like more often than the other guys. And what I would do is go and talk to you have to go to the payroll, pick up all, thousands of dollars, and make sure that you have the right allocation for each guy, because some of them wanted money, cash. I got like $25 a month, and I never spent it because I don't, there's no place to spend it in the jungle, but I would spend it on the cheeseburger, hamburger, and scotch. So anyway, so I do that, but I would go visit each platoon in my company and give them each guy separately, give them their money and their pay slip, and then ask them if they had issues with if their checks were getting back to their family in America. And some wouldn't, some would have issues, some would not. There was always something going on. And they couldn't just go to the payroll department and get this taken care of. You can't just pick up a phone and call somebody.
Right.
So I would find out what they needed to have done, and I'd go to the payroll and I'd sit down and I'd say, this guy, his family's not getting his check, what's going on? And they would fix it. And I go back and tell these guys. So I didn't have to do that, but just like doing this other stuff, I felt like that's how you become one with the guys.
Right. Right. I was going to say
you do what they do, and you look out for them. So that's kind of how that went.
Yeah, I think those kinds of practices are things that would, kind of reduce the alienation. And I've heard a lot of complaints about how with military hierarchy and the divisions between the ranks that these people get really resentful, I guess, of their higher ups at times. And so I think doing things like that and just maintaining the human connection and just wanting to help people could definitely help diffuse some of that. I've heard discussions about officers, being shot in the back while walking through the jungle. I don't know if you ever heard anything like that, but
I didn't have it happen around that I knew, but I hear stories about it. They called, fraggings and that kind of stuff, where people would be, and I knew some officers there who were wouldn't listen to their guys, and they would say, I know better, but I always listened, whatever they said to do, I trusted them. So we never had any incidents with a booby trap, except once there was an accident. Somebody set off a tripwire by mistake, but my guys were good. They could find these booby traps. They would take their time, and I wasn't rushing them. I would push them. We found several, like the punji pits here and there, and there's howitzer rounds, mortar rounds on the other side of a log that I described. That's a favorite ploy. These guys would do that. Like every squad, like I said, they had a point and a drag guy. The point guy looks for booby traps, and the drag guy looks for anybody who could hurt us. Mm. So these guys, they knew their stuff, and that was good.
It's just so hard for me to imagine making these daily, walking for days on end, and that any step you take could blow you up, quite literally. How did you deal? Was that in your head every time, as you're walking through, constantly, or was it something that you just sort of had to accept and keep pushing forward?
Well, it's a little bit of both, because you're there, you have to do your job, and you don't just you can't relax. So that's why it's a unit, a cohesive unit, so everybody has their job. And these guys, I had to trust them to do that, because I didn't know how to do that.
Right.
I wasn't trained to look for these kind of things, but these guys, let them do that, and they basically they did their job. So I was secure in that thing, but you never know any moment, because a couple times people were attacked people were killed, not in my unit, but
Right.
we were ambushed one time that was, surprising, and like several of us had to go to the hospital.
Right, including
But
yourself.
nobody was killed.
Cause from the shrapnel?
Yeah.
Right.
From the shrapnel, I got shrapnel in the face and neck and hip.
If it's
The
okay,
guy, my radar, huh?
I was just going to ask you to
What?
describe the ambush and what happened if you're comfortable.
Yeah, we were in this place that was you knew there was some heavy duty activity because the path was at least a foot to 2 feet wide and it was well worn. We try not to follow past it because I like to cut our way, but it takes a lot longer.
Right.
We've been up and down this trail too many times, I think, and so I think they knew we were coming. They set up for us, and we were leaving to go to the next location that we had planned to hit. And next thing I know, there's a blast or something, and I'm being knocked down, and my face is stinging. And I thought, well, it's because I hit the ground or something like that, but it was on the other side.
Right.
And then to the point in the guy, because I'm in the first squad with these guys. One guy was the point guy. One of them got shot in I think his femur was broken.
Ooh.
And another guy had his elbow shattered, the point and drag guys. And several other people were hit. My radar operator, apparently, I think he got a bullet through his ankle. He was behind me. So I didn't get that one. So about 6 of us had to be in medevac, which is in this triple canopy stuff. So that was a lot of fun. Couldn't land a helicopter. So I'd get this other squad who was behind me. I asked them to move up and surround these guys who were on the ground and lay down fire. So in the meantime, these Cobras, or the attack helicopters, are firing up the area around us. And that felt like they were right on top of us. But they were just, they didn't say they were going to do this. They were just firing. So I don't know if they saw the enemy or what, because I think we had to throw out a smoke grenade to tell us where we were, so they'd know that's us. And then
Right.
they say what color is. They have to identify the color, red, black, whatever, not black. But anyway, so then there's 2 of these Cobras. They always go in packs, pairs. They were like, firing up the ground around us. You couldn't see anything. You could just hear it. But it sounded like it was right on top of us. So that was a little hairy. But then eventually, things calmed down. I asked they started taking care of the wounded, and we're calling in for a medevac. So a couple medevacs had to come in, but they couldn't land, so they lower this, I forget what they call it, but there's a name for it. Anyway, it looks like an anchor. It comes down, it's on a heavy cable, and it has these prongs on it that you open out, and you sit on them.
Huh.
So my sergeant, with the platoon sergeant I was with, he got wounded too. So he and I were both doing this, straddling our legs. And they haul you back into the helicopter and then bring you inside and take you off to the hospital. The other 2 guys had to be taken out in a basket. So they lower a basket down, we put the guy in, they were bandaged up and everything. As far as I know, they were all okay, but maybe they had some difficulties. I meant to look them up and I couldn't find them.
Yeah, certainly.
I think one of them went to a hospital.
I was going to say a broken femur is a pretty, you're not going back into combat after that.
No, I think not. A shattered elbow, that kind of stuff, I don't think so. The rest of them, several of them came back because I came back after. But I was out for like 2 weeks because I got this wound on my hip. I didn't even know I had it. But I kept thinking, there's something hurts here. So I asked the doctor when I got to the hospital, could you look at it? He said, yeah, you have a piece of shrapnel. So they took it out, but in the meantime, it got infected. When you get infected there, it's really nasty stuff. It's like jungle rot. They call it jungle rot. It's like a oozing kind of stuff comes out of your wounds. And I had that. So it hurt like hell for a while. But anyway, they took that out, and I had to wear like a bandage for like 2 weeks before it finally recovered. So then I went back to the field.
Was that pretty, I know you probably don't have the exact date or anything, but roughly how far into your term of service were you?
I think I looked up my Purple Heart date and it was in March. So that was pretty soon after I got there. But then I went back in the jungle. I was back in the jungle for at least to August or something like that, I think.
Was it hard to
Because I
transition?
don't think I got. Pardon?
I said, was it hard to transition once you'd kind of been out of it and in the hospital and laid up in a bed for a little bit?
I felt like I needed to be there, just like I felt like, why we need to be in Vietnam. I felt that I needed to be back there for my men because I was not sure how much I could trust that particular platoon sergeant that I had. After he left, I saw him later. He transferred to the MP Corps. So he was directing traffic one day when I saw him because I think he didn't want to be out there. And I had another guy that came in after him, and he was good. In fact, there's a picture I have somewhere of us taking a bath with the rest of the guys in this river. It's my platoon sergeant and I sitting there, soaping up in the river.
That's funny.
Anyway, I just thought about that.
Okay, so I also wanted to ask you about how you felt when you knew that your time was almost up. I know that a lot of people made calendars. Was that something you did?
Yeah, I probably carried in my ammo box. It was a picture of like a helmet or a boot. I forget which was, but it was marked into like 365 little, sections. And every time the day passed, you colored yours in somehow, so you knew. Everybody knew how many days they had left. If you were short, that was a good thing. You had like 10 days left before you left, and that was good because you generally knew when you had to leave. But I looked out. Maybe other people did, but usually your tour was for a year. So I went over in January, but I left in mid-October because Nixon, who was the president at the time, was winding the war down. So they were having troop cuts. And so because of that, I got to actually, they call it ETS, Exploration Terminal Service, right. ETS out of Fort Lewis. So when I left Vietnam, it took a long, like 18-hour flight or something like that. You had to fly, land in Guam and Hawaii, wherever else. And then you get back to Fort Lewis, Washington. And then you hang out there and they you have to take a drug test, et cetera. They won't let you out if you don't pass that drug test. But at that time, I processed out and they said, okay, you're out and your official term ends in October 13th or something like that. So I didn't actually have to serve 2 years, but I was happy to get out. Frankly, it wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't really like being in the Army.
Right.
I was not career material.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, especially, an experience like that would, by the end of it, you would know. And I wanted to ask you for the record too. So what rank were you when you left Vietnam, and what medals did you earn during your service?
So I was a second lieutenant when I got commissioned. And that's usually, unless they do something really major, you get promoted within about a year to first lieutenant. So I was promoted in January while I was there, and to first lieutenant, which is where I left. But medal-wise, let's see, when I was in Fort Polk, my company commander wanted me to write up something about what I did there, because I did some things for the company that they hadn't done before. Like, I engaged in a physical fitness training thing that the company didn't do. They had no plans for that. So I wanted us to look good because there were competitions. They call it a physical fitness combat ready test or something like that. PCPT, whatever that, I forget what it stands for. You had to like run a mile, you had to carry or throw a hand grenade for accuracy, you had to run this zigzag course, and you had to do this hand over hand on a ladder or rack. Anyway, that kind of stuff. So every other day or so, I'd go out there and lead them in physical fitness stuff, which is not always, I wasn't in the best shape to do that, but you had to kind of put them in the right formation to do that. Then we'd jog around the block where our company was. So I did that. I also, did some other things. And anyway, so for that, my company commander had me awarded the Army Accommodation Medal. Not a super high medal, but it's, it's up there, I guess. It's Army Accommodation Medal. And then in Vietnam, everything else, when you're into combat for like, I think it's 90 days or something like that, you get the combat infantryman's badge, which is like it's like a rifle on a shield or some kind of thing. And then I got, like I said, the air medal for helicopter missions, the Purple Heart, and then you get all these campaign things just for being there, like the Vietnam Service ribbon and the Vietnam campaign ribbon. There were probably some battalion awards, but I never paid attention to those. Mm-hmm. Then Purple Heart for being wounded, and then Bronze Star, what that was for service. And I think that was it. So I forgot.
Yes, that matched up with the list you gave me. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the Bronze Star because that's not one that I'm super familiar with. Was there a specific event that brought that on, or was it for your officer position, just general performance?
I think it's you've heard of a Silver Star, Bronze Star. The Silver Star is like really for valor kind of things, when you're out there and you like save the life of somebody, or you protect, or you give your own life, or whatever kind of thing. Right. Not like a Medal of Honor, but just lower down there.
Sure.
The Bronze Star is just below that. So you can get two versions of it. One is for valor. So if you did something like heroic, like saving someone's life, or giving your own life, or whatever, you get. Otherwise, there's this one for service. So I think, a lot of us got it for service. It was just I didn't even know about it. It's a blanket kind of thing, like maybe my whole unit got a Bronze Star. Mm. But it's not something they just hand out to everybody. I think if you go through a rough time, you have a lot of confronting the enemy, dealing with all kinds of stuff. So that was that.
Right. So tell me about reuniting with your family, possibly that girlfriend, and what that was like coming home, and just the transition experience.
Well, my friends, I had two friends that wrote to me. My good friend from high school, his name was John. He and his wife, he would write to me, and my friend in Denver, actually I think they were in Texas at the time, guy I went to college with, my sister and my parents would write, and my girlfriend would write. But that girlfriend, I kept thinking, oh yeah, I've got a girlfriend, that's great. Even though I wasn't planning on getting involved before I went over there, it just kind of happened. And I was thinking about all these other guys who got these Dear John letters. Well, I got a Dear John letter. She said she met somebody else, and basically we were done. So that was kind of like, well, can you explain all this? I was kind of upset about that.
Sure.
So I saw her a couple of times when after I got back. She lived in Miami also. And eventually I just, a friend of mine introduced me to somebody else, and that started another relationship. So that was just the way it went. But anyway.
She sent the letter to Vietnam?
Yeah.
Wow. Oof. Yeah, that would not be a great, you're like, oh yay, letter from home, and then
yeah. I know, because I'm hearing other guys in my squad, in the platoon, they were getting letters, and I kept thinking, nah, I'm lucky, I didn't get one. No, I'm wrong. So that didn't work out too well.
But it was for the best, and I mean, that's my assessment as your son's friend. But I'm glad he's around. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, yes, so you got back, reunited with family, and this was in, you said 71?
One, yes.
So there was still a couple years left in the war. Did you follow things that were happening over there?
A little bit here and there, yeah. About like in 73, I think our troops that finally pull out, but there was still conflict going on. Right. There were still people being killed. Right. That kind of stuff, 73. So I don't know. I think it was hard to hear directly from the guys that I was with, but I heard later after I was working on that island that one of my squad leaders had set a, they call them mechanical ambush. You could set these up in like a defensive perimeter. You have like a claymore mine. I don't even know where that is. It's concave shape, about a pound of C4 and ball bearings and stuff like that. You stick that out and you can detonate it by hand. Well, we had this technique where you could take a 9-volt battery, strip the wires off those two leads, and then like link them together, and then put them across a trail, and everybody tripped the wire that made contact, and the mine would go off and turn you into hamburger. They killed some VC doing that. You would put one up. We did that every night, though. We'd set these up. We put a tripwire with a flare on our side that would warn you if you tripped it. But on the other side was just the tripwire with the mine. So some of my guys were setting those up one time when I first started in country, and they mispositioned it wrong or whatever, and it blew up while they were setting it up. They were hurt and had to go get medevacs. I don't know how severe they were, but one guy's back of his leg was laid open, the back of his thigh was all laid open. So that was pretty hairy, because it happened, and it's like, what's going on here? And I'm talking to the company commander, and all of a sudden, boom, big cloud of black smoke was in the air.
Yeah.
I didn't write that down before, but that's kind of.
But they survived.
As far as I know, I didn't see them again, but they were conscious when I left them. I was trying to help them when they got them medevaced out. I don't think they ever came back.
I got nervous when you said that they were hand detonating this. I mean, that my immediate thought.
No. You could do that. And if you were like setting one up in your defensive perimeter, you had it was like a mechanical device that you press the lever on it, but you'd have thing, set up like, hundreds of feet away from you, behind a tree or something, that facing away from you.
Okay.
Although there was another story, but I won't go there. Anyway, so that you could trigger it that way, but this was the mechanical one. So that was apparently, according to the Geneva Convention, you can do things like that. There was always a question about the legality of those kind of things, but didn't bother us apparently.
So when the war did eventually end, I want to know a little bit about how you heard about it, how you got that news, and then what your immediate feelings were.
Well, I would listen to the news a lot and read. So to me, it was like, basically, I thought we were there for a reason, that we were needed, and we were doing this, almost like a community service for the Vietnamese people, to save them from communism. I thought that was our goal, to do that.
Right.
But later on, when you see what went on, and it almost feels like the same thing that happened in Afghanistan, where these soldiers we thought were highly trained. Maybe it was their leadership, maybe it was something else. I don't know what. They're just overwhelming odds, but they basically, collapsed. Some units, the Vietnamese units, were highly trained and very good fighters. We even had these Korean. I didn't see them, but I knew about them.
Yes.
They call them Republic of Korea ROK soldiers. They were really good. And they had these Hmong, HMONG fighters from their mountain they lived in. They were really good too. But I don't know if the Corps people were motivated enough, but after the fall, it was like, you see all these pictures of their troops running and leaving their equipment, and we were just dumping helicopters off of carriers and stuff. And I'm thinking, like, what happened here? Why do we lose 58,000 men for this to be the end result? So I was very upset about that.
Right.
It made me think, well, then why were we even there? So after like subsequent, issues we've had or other wars locally, like, yeah, okay, we can send men to train and train the other service, supply them with weaponry and so forth, military hardware, but unless it's like impacting us directly, I don't think we need to be in harm's way. We don't need to be on the ground. Some cases, yeah, I can see that, Bin Laden, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But this was one of those things. I think train them. If they're not going to support or stay there and fight, and make something of it, then we don't need to be there. We shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be sacrificing our own young men in these kind of situations.
Right. And you're talking about the Arvin, right? Once Americans pulled out. How was your experience, your interactions, even, and this is kind of going back a little, but I had meant to ask this earlier because you said that you traded off bunks with them occasionally. So I'm assuming you interfaced. What was your impression of them in the field at the time?
We didn't have a lot of, like I said, unless you read the newspaper, you didn't really get a report unless it was in your briefing about your local mission. So we didn't know what was going on in the rest of the country. They'd have the Armed Forces radio if you got lucky enough to hear that, or you could read the Stars and Stripes. But they're not going to go into details. So you have to get that from the chain of command. But the only incidents I remember where we actually had the interactions, but we never talked to them directly.
Right.
They were just a group of soldiers. There were on either side. I think it was like a PR thing where our troops were every other bunker. And these were big bunkers. I mean, with a lot of people in them. They were just on one side. They kept to themselves. We were over here. There was another group on the other side. That was the amount of contact we had with them. Upper level, I'm sure there was stuff going on, but one time we actually had they called him a Kansas City Star, Kit Carson Scout. He was a captured NVA that they trained and indoctrinated, and he became like a guide for us. Oh. But if there was any kind of firefights going on, he was running he'd be the back of the platoon somewhere, hiding, because if they caught him, they'd kill him for sure.
Right, and he's
I didn't talk to him. He had an interpreter that was worked with us. It was one of my members of my platoon, Proctor, communicate. But that was only for like a couple of weeks, and we never had anybody else. But he was an Arvin.
Right.
Anyway, so that was just disappointed in the outcome of how that worked, and he made like this. You wonder who these people lay down their lives for what?
On both sides, really. There was a lot of death that happened, and the end result, in terms of political formation was
sure. And there were bad things that happened on our side too.
Certainly.
I wasn't party to any of that, but you hear stories about people being killed, or villages destroyed, or somebody like revenge. But that I wasn't aware of anything that happened in our units.
Right.
But their information is probably tightly controlled, and you're not going to hear it.
Sure. I've had some experiences interviewing veterans who did witness things like that, but I think it really just depended on the culture of where you were at, and it seems like that wasn't the case for you because your platoon wasn't really interacting with villagers and going into villages too often, it seems.
No, we only the one time, and look, except for where I was at the beach, the Eagle Beach thing.
Right.
They worked for us, and they left during the night, and so we talked to them, interact with them, but there was no other than that. But the only other time was we had to walk through a village, and we camped on the other side of it. And then we didn't interact with them at all because it was hands off. You couldn't go into you couldn't go visit the shops, you couldn't go visit the facilities, you couldn't go to dinner there, etc. Whereas you could see it in other places, like in Saigon, you'd see pictures of GIs and intermingling with everybody. It's like, we were not allowed to do that.
Right. Yes, because I've heard some people tell stories of being invited to dinner and a Vietnamese household or something like that. So
so we didn't have that kind of close relationship.
Right.
Like I mentioned, having what we call the hooch maid that took care of and cleaned our facilities, and they would sweep up and they would burn the trash and take the refuse and that kind of stuff, but hardly ever engage with them. They were only there during the day,
right,
and then they'd leave.
So you don't think you had much of a interaction or takeaway culturally from Like what the
No,
people.
I didn't. I think one time when there were some of the people I got to be friendly with them, they were nice. One of the women got me a Coke one day, and another one made me this meal, which had some kind of like a soup thing with like some vegetable I didn't recognize.
Huh.
That was as close as I got to anything like that. They were very nice and friendly, and I tried to be nice to them. I was going to tell you about this other episode with, like you mentioned, the racial relationships. So there was this one squad leader who didn't get along with the blacks in his squad. So I found a way to get around it by making one of the blacks a squad leader and create a whole new different squad. So I pulled out the people that were having friction with this guy and put them in a different squad by themselves. So after that, there wasn't this kind of friction because it was like an almost everyday thing where they were doing stuff. The squad leader, there was something,
Right.
I don't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
He was of a different ethnic group himself, so it was like, I didn't get it. Why was this friction? Because I didn't see these other people, they weren't the ones creating it. It was this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Right. But you let something like that. I mean, it's good that you didn't ignore it because situations like that really can escalate when people are under the amount of stress that you are in a war zone. So yeah, I do remember you writing that or telling me about it, and I'm glad you brought it up because so was it just this one particular incident where you had to sort of rearrange, and otherwise it was generally okay with integration?
I think it was. I mean, I was with these guys day in and day out, for months at a time. So I didn't maybe know everything that was going on, but I remember like consoling some. One guy's mother died or something like that, and he was very upset. So I tried to, deal with him. And this episode I mentioned with those soldiers, there was that same sergeant. He also showed up drunk one time after we were in a stand down or something like that. He came to the landing pad for us to go on our next mission, carrying like half a six-pack of beer, and he had already consumed probably another six-pack before that. So I could have let him put him up on charges, had him, Article 15 or worse. But we were only going to go to the fire base, and if things were pretty cool and calm there, I didn't expect that he'd be at risk, because that's a big thing to do, and it's probably something anybody else would have not done it. But I said, let him go out there. The sergeant said, "Can you do this?" And I said, I'll let him. But the guy came out, he was standing on the landing pad ready for us to go, still holding a six-pack. My first sergeant took that away from him.
Yeah,
He's
good.
standing there next to me, waving his machete around. I'm thinking, like, I had my rifle with me, so I was ready in case I needed to, like, get him in the privates with it or something like that. He just was ranting about something. Anyway, so I said, this was the question: do I let him come out with us and just let him sober up, and he'll be good to go? Because he was actually good when he was sober. He knew his stuff, and he was one of those kind of guys who could find stuff on the trail and that kind of stuff. Anyway,
Right.
long story short, he came out with us. I think he got off the helicopter, plopped on the ground. I didn't see him till the next day. I think he just stayed there and passed out. And that was it. And after that, it was like nothing happened.
That's pretty funny.
So that was questionable on my part. Probably
Turned out okay.
he should have been up on charges.
Mm.
If we'd been in on a field mission where we had to be in the jungle or something, I couldn't let that happen.
No. I mean, I think in general it was probably a bad idea to get drunk. Did you see a lot of like outright drunkenness?
I didn't notice it as much. There probably were these people at these, when we were in the rear, some people like their permanent party thing. They're not infantry, and they're not involved in the day-to-day jungle operations and search and clear stuff. They probably get bored, so they probably have the opportunity. They go and get drunk at night, because I don't know what kind of restrictions they had. Maybe there were people in our group. I think there were people that probably were doing drugs, I'm sure. But I think limited exposure to that and what was going on, they were keeping it from me, I guess.
Right.
And I didn't go seeking it out, but I remember like you could see these little plastic vials on the ground sometimes. You just walk a couple of feet and here they were, and apparently that's what they got, heroin or whatever.
Probably heroin.
Shooting it up or smoking or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember another guy, one time I was sleeping in some bunk in the rear. Some GI came in that I didn't know. He asked me if I had any smack, and I said, no, I don't have anything. I could have reported him, I guess, but like, whatever. So I think it was probably a problem there, and there were enough people having issues with it.
Right.
But as far as I know, my guys, if I saw it in them, I'd wanted to check them out. But I try to give them a free hand, like you're a responsible person. But maybe I'm naive in a lot of ways. But I didn't want to be on their case or like writing people a compensation. Trying to live and let live is one thing. If you're doing your job and you're doing a good job, then I'm happy.
Right. If it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, but like the squad thing, where that had to move the squad members around, I think that was all right. And there was another time where one of the troops he woke up screaming and having night terrors or whatever it is. I don't know what was happening with him, but I said, I'm not the medic here. I said, so I turned to my medic. I said, what do you think? Should we call a medevac and have him take him out of here? Other people probably would say, no, just let him tough it out. It's a one time. I didn't know that. So I deferred to my medic. I said, what do you think? Let him stay, call medevac. So we called the medevac in the middle of the night. They came and got him, took him away. I never saw him again.
No, I think that's
so I don't know what happened.
To do. I mean, I know at the time period, like mental health crises weren't as much recognized as like a threat to physical health, but you don't really want a loose cannon with a gun next to you in the field. So
no, somebody's going to have other issues. There were nobody in my unit, but I'd hear other stories about this one guy. They were trying to, set him up with something. It was a different platoon, so nobody that I thought, that's kind of weird. He didn't sound like he was fit to be out. He should have been out there.
Right. Okay, so I guess we'll get kind of into some of the, we've gone pretty long. So I'll try and get into some of the wrap-up questions about just your life after service and some of maybe a little bit of musings. But I wanted to just ask, how did you meet your wife? And tell me a little bit about your kids.
Okay, I met my wife when I was in graduate school. I was in a doctoral program at USF in industrial organizational psychology. I worked at the USF and I did a lot of data analysis. I was a graduate research assistant because you had to have some kind of money to pay your way,
Sure.
Food, living, etc. And one day this guy that I knew from another department came in and said, I want to introduce you to this woman, and she maybe can use your help or something like that. She's doing data analysis. She's like a first-year graduate student in sociology. So she sat down next to me and we talked for a little bit, but I'd be we'd sit at these dummy terminals typing in commands and sending stuff to the mainframe, etc. She was over here watching. I could see that she was having trouble, but she didn't want to ask for help. So I started interjecting, like, here's what you have to do, and here's how this works. So we became friends, and then a group of people would play volleyball after work a couple times a week. So she got into that. We started going out as a group, and we'd go out for beers afterwards and have Chinese or whatever. So eventually, over time, we started going out, dating. So that's really how the thing got started.
And this was
the kids. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask, was that your master's or your PhD program?
PhD.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a separation between like each degree. So like my bachelor's, I got that in '69, went into the service, came out in '71. In '72, I started my master's program, a 2-year terminal master's in Orlando. It wasn't called that at that time, but it was UCF. got that degree after 2 years or so, and then went to work for the federal government for 5 years. That's where those professors that I knew associated with them. So I lived in D.C. for 5 years, and then I thought I was going to go give that up and go get my doctorate in psychology. So I went, then I came to USF, and that's where that stuff started.
Okay.
So graduate school, studying that, did various jobs here and there. Then I worked for, while I was at Verizon, I worked for GTE, which became Verizon. So I worked there for like 30 years. As some, incidental jobs before all that as part of my graduate assistantships.
Okay, cool. And you were going to talk about your kids.
Yeah, they both of my children went to U of F, and they on their own decided that they wanted to go into engineering. So my daughter picked environmental engineering, which kind of surprised me because I never saw any interest in things like that. She was interested in music. My son was too. They never wanted to tinker with mechanical things or take things apart that I could see. I tried to buy them microscopes and things like that, and chemistry sets, but not much happened there. But they all worked out really well. So my daughter, she went to the IB program at our local high school here, and it's a middle magnet school as an IB program. She did really well in that, got on the honor roll, et cetera, et cetera. And then so she went to U of F. She was in the dance team there and in environmental engineering. She graduated after 5 years. Their program was 5 years. So she works in environmental engineering and firm in Denver. And my son is in his last year of a 5-year program. He started in environmental engineering, decided to go into mechanical. So he's almost done with that. I think if he can get an internship this summer, that would be great. He's looking into that. But ultimately, she should be done by next fall. And what happens after that, I don't know yet. But we'll see what happens. But they're great kids. They love music, and they're couldn't ask for anything better.
Yes, very, very musically talented. I was kind of curious. Was that your influence, or perhaps your wife's?
My wife, but she would sing in their whole family would do I think they were in the Sound of Music when they were growing up back in Ohio and stuff. And she can sing, but I think she was in a couple little plays with some of the family members. But I like listening to music. I play the guitar really poorly, but I can play some chords. And so, like I said, I listen to music all day long almost. I don't sing, but I listen to the music. And I took piano when I was in high school, 4 summers.
Okay.
Other than that, that's kind of it. They kind of develop it on their own, but he sang in this choral unit in high school. They call it Pride or something like that. And then he also sang in the university concert choir in Florida. And he now has this part-time job where he sings with this Presbyterian church.
Right.
And on Sundays he sings their services. He still likes to do it. I've heard him sing and harmonize, and he and my daughter and sometimes my wife will sit down at our piano and they'll be playing and singing stuff, and I'm just smiling away watching them.
That's really cool. I was kind of curious about that because Colin does seem to be kind of an all-around musician, and I wasn't sure where that came from. But yeah, that's
yeah. He likes to play the guitar. Every once in a while, I get to accompany them doing something, but it has to be very simple, like maybe 3 chords. But usually, I'm just watching it. I forgot. I can't even remember the piano. I can remember the treble clef notes, but the bass clef. I have to look it up. Is that an F? So I'm not very good about it. I just like watch and
sure.
listen.
That's more my speed too. I wanted to ask you how you talk to your kids about your military experiences and how you would have possibly reacted. I know it didn't come up, but if you did have a child or a loved one who wanted to join the military, what your advice would be.
Basically, I tell them what I've told you, and if they ever ask, I usually tell them. There's nothing I would hold back about it. Mm-hmm. Colin had an interest in earlier, like what I did, because he had to do like a talk for his high school or something like that. So I think he borrowed my dress uniform and wasn't even complete, but he took that and went to school and told some stories, I guess, that I told him. Mm. I think I also shared this thing with one of my good friends. His son was doing a similar kind of thing that you're doing, but it was on the high school level. Where he had to interview a Vietnam veteran. So he did that, and he wrote it all up, and then he had to make a presentation at some event where a bunch of people from like the American Legion were there. There were other people like that.
Sure.
So anyway, but I've talked to Colin about it. Basically, I think he's probably more a pacifist than I am. But I said the war is not anywhere you would want to be. There are other things you could do. If you wanted to do it, I'd support you, but I think he has absolutely no interest in that. But community service thing, I like that. I think that would be something if we did that on a regular basis, that everybody coming out of college or high school spent some time in service to the country somewhere or another, or local community. Doesn't have to be full-time or anything like that. But I had friends who were in the Peace Corps, served in Turkey instead of being in the service, and that's what they gave. So I like that idea. But military stuff, I don't know if I talk them out of it, but I'd say make sure you know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? You know what the consequences are, and what can happen to you. Mm-hmm. And they'll, of course, say, well, you did it. Well,
right.
All along, I was had my fingers crossed that I wasn't going to come back, in a worse shape, or not come back at all.
Right. Okay, well, let's see, maybe to wrap up, maybe I'll ask you a little bit more about your day-to-day right now. What is your life like? What do you do in your free time, which you probably have a decent bit of since you're retired now?
Well, lately, since I've been going to doctor's appointments, not because I'm really in bad shape or anything, but I had to have a root canal, and then I had to have a crown, and then I had some some cataract surgery here and there. But most of it, I think I'm in pretty good health. I usually exercise every day, or at least walk. I used to jog a mile or so every other day until it got too hot. So my friend gave me a treadmill, so I used to get on that treadmill every day. Do some kind of home aerobic things, do Tai Chi. Then I do other stuff like gardening, yard stuff. There's always something to do in the yard. We have a pretty big yard, and there's always something going on.
I bet.
So yeah, that's a busy thing. Plus, I'm the chief cook, so I cook. I go to the grocery store, plan other meals. I like to make, not super fancy things, but not just run-of-the-mill things. So I'm always finding, I might have 5 or 6 binders full of Bon Appetit manuals and other manuals from the Food Network that I've kept, copies of stuff on chicken and pork and stir fry and stuff. So those are my things. And, other days I probably would like to go to musical concerts. I'm averse to going to any indoor things if I don't have to go there for a while. So I think I'm in good shape. 75 years old. I'm still doing good. I got good reviews from my doctors.
Good.
Go see. I have minor asthma stuff, so I go see an allergist once a year. Go to a skin doctor once a year.
Sure.
Plus, I also go to the VA for stuff there because they basically sound in a category that I don't have to pay for anything except for drugs and medication, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I've been to physical therapy with the VA, and they're really good. Mm-hmm. And I've been to their eye clinic, and it's no charge for this stuff. Wow. Got a new pair of glasses from them. So wow. There's things like that. Wow. Visiting my family, talking to my sister, and her family.
Oh, yeah. Where are they located?
My sister and her husband live in Lakeland.
Oh, okay. That's not too far.
Yeah, she retired several years. She retired before I did, which I thought was not fair.
She's younger, right?
She's younger than me. Yeah, she's younger. But they have a nice house there, and my brother-in-law's an architect, and he's only a year younger than I am, but he's still working. But he loves it. He just can't cut loose because he's got these projects and he feels, kind of dedicated or obligated to, complete them. So eventually that'll happen, and eventually my wife will retire, and we can maybe travel some more when the COVID situation is not so severe. I mean, it's not as severe as it maybe was, but we'd like to go to places like Ireland and things like that.
Right. The overseas travel is hard with COVID because you never know if you're going to get stuck.
Well, similar thing happened because my mother-in-law wanted to do this big trip thing for family members. So there were 24 family members, like grandkids, etc. She was trying to get everyone to go to Mexico. They couldn't decide where. They finally settled in Cancun. I said, I'm going to go on because I said, my age, etc. I don't know have any underlying conditions, but I don't want to be there. And not only that, you're going to have flight cancellations, etc. and other issues.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that happened. Nobody got COVID directly. Some people got it before and they had to back out. It's only 9 people that went up going. So and then my wife comes back. Their flight was canceled. They had to fly into Fort Lauderdale instead of Tampa. So we had to work our way to get them picked up and drive them back. Well, then, anyway, so it's like I didn't want to do it, and I'm kind of glad I didn't go. So they were gone for like a week. They said they had a great time. I think fine. My daughter and son went, and they didn't get sick.
Well, it's just the luck of the draw, I think, as in my experience.
I think so. Right? You're right.
Yeah. So.
You think you're right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop our recording if there isn't anything else you want to say on the record while I'm still recording.
I think I probably talked your head off, so I don't know there's anything else. I kind of scanned through what I wrote up, and I don't see anything that's like, oh yeah, I should have said this,
right,
or I should have done that. It's like I think I just babbled on for quite a while, and hopefully something comes from this.
Oh, there was lots of great information, and I don't think we got to. I mean, it's hard to stay perfectly chronological, but that's okay. We don't always think chronologically, and such is life. But I would not consider any of it babbling. I got some really, really great insight, and I really appreciated talking to you. It's just been great. I know we've been trying to
get
for a while, so.
Yeah, and I didn't ask you about yourself, but I figured I need to.
You're not supposed to.
Okay, good.
Yes. It's a one-way interview. So my coworkers who have to transcribe this would be annoyed at me if I filled this up with my life details that they already have to hear about at work. So.
Sure.
Well, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. And just before I do, I just wanted to say one last thank you on behalf of myself, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and the Library of Congress, where this will eventually end up after some processing. Yeah, so.
Okay.